Hi, it's me, Laura, and welcome back to my channel, Aquamarine18, or welcome if you're new here. This is the second recap video that I've ever done, hopefully to be a monthly pattern, kind of end of month recap of things I've been doing, decks I've been working with, books I've read, and any other kind of interesting odds and ends that seem like they might be of interest, I guess, or worth mentioning. So I'm going to talk about those things, which I'll list in the description box, and also just have a little conversation about the coming month, or the current month, I guess, because I'm late, the current month of July and what that's looking like for me. So June's been a really nice month for the most part. I work, for folks who don't know, at a university, and so I really work through the school year, which for us is September to April predominantly. I have a second job which is year-round, but it's a much more part-time. So, you know, April is kind of exam season. May, there's always grading exams and doing things to kind of wrap up the school year in a good way, as well as kind of applying for teaching positions for the coming year. And June, you know, some of that continues, but is the first kind of month that is more relaxed for me in terms of my work schedule. June has also been, where I live, finally the first month of beautiful, sunny, warm weather. So really I have been happy to spend June in a pretty relaxing way, with more free time than I am used to, getting to just get out and enjoy the weather. Finally, after what seems like the longest winter for us that was quite snowy and very cold for many months. So that's been great. I've mostly I've not been out of town too much, relaxing around the house, getting jobs around the house done that I haven't necessarily had time for before. The other really fun, exciting thing that has happened in June is that we got a canoe. So I have been canoeing around the local small lake and river as much as we've been able to, and that has been really nice. We've been planning some trips around to different conservation areas and things like this. I have a cabin rented for later in the summer to take the canoe with us, and I really love getting out on the water. Hopefully I can maybe share some video from the canoe later, but I'm not really sure. I'm very nervous about taking and using my phone on the canoe because I just envision myself dropping it in the water. So we'll see what happens with that, but maybe I can show some canoe footage at a later time. But that's what I've been doing in June. My cards for June, and I didn't show these in my last recap actually, I realized later. I, every year around kind of December 31st, January 1st time, I do a year ahead spread, and I have one tarot card and one oracle, and it's always an animal themed oracle card for each month of the year. And so my cards for June of 2019 have been the Knight of Wands, and this is of course the Knight of Wands from the Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and along with my animal card Snail. And Snail's keyword here is respire. How do I get that to show in the best way? I kind of wish the webcam didn't autofocus in the ways that it does, but Snail says respire. That's really frustrating because this art is really cool and it kind of focuses and then it comes out of focus. Not the best. Anyway, I'm gonna work on that. These cards, for me, there's a bit of a contrast, right? On the one hand, the Knight of Wands for me is all about kind of chasing your passions and going for things, and is a really active, full of movement kind of card. Whereas Snail, on the other hand, and the respire keyword, I think, adds to this. Snail is like, needs a lot of time to kind of retreat and reflect and be by themselves. They carry their home on their back, right? You know, taking time to maybe be a bit of a homebody, so to speak, literally for the snail, and not so outgoing as the Knight of Wands. And I can totally feel that for me in June, thinking about kind of the struggle I always have around these times of year, where all of a sudden I go from having kind of tons and tons and tons of work for my job to having comparatively quite a lot less, right? And I'm kind of, okay, now I've got time to actually just kind of spend with myself, at home, but I don't know how to do that because I feel like I need to be working all the time. What do I do with all this energy? And how do I also kind of just give myself time to really enjoy the fact that I have time? And I feel like those two cards kind of speak to that tension really well. And it's one that I feel really strongly and kind of struggle with and experience and work through pretty much annually. So in the last recap video, my May recap, I talked about how my decks for the month of June, usually working with maybe one tarot and oracle deck per month, would be the Margarethe Petersen tarot, which is upstairs, so I don't have it with me right now, and the Illuminated Earth Oracle, which I did an unboxing of earlier on when I received it. And I have to say, right after I made that May recap, my plans completely changed. So I did work with the Illuminated Earth Oracle quite a bit, and you can watch the recap video or the walkthrough if you haven't seen this deck before. I did work with it with most of the human cards removed, as I expected that I would. And it's a really beautiful nature-based oracle deck. Here are the backs. There's a lot of kind of elemental energy here. And I would work with it on bigger readings that I did for myself, maybe around kind of new moon and full moon times, things like this, to kind of pull an extra card after the tarot. And I really enjoyed this deck, Illuminated Earth, and I think it's going to be one of my favorites. And sometimes I do struggle a little bit with any oracle deck that isn't animals. I'm really good with animal-based oracles, and they are my favorite. But this one I really didn't, and I really enjoyed working with that one. But the Margarethe Petersen, I did some larger readings for myself, and I don't do those too often, a few a month. And I had really good experiences with the Margarethe Petersen overall. It's beautiful, it's abstract, but this month I have to say my heart was completely stolen in ways I did not expect by the Neo Tarot. I ordered this deck for a host of reasons. I think that the art style is really great. But what really called to me about this deck, and it's something that I take into account when I'm buying decks all the time now, is the diversity of folks depicted in these cards. And it's not in order because I just grabbed it off my reading table and brought it down for this video. This deck has so many different body shapes included in it. It has so many different skin tones depicted in it. It has gender diversity depicted in it and a lot of gender fluidity there. And when I saw this deck, and I commented on someone's video about this, I feel like it might have been Tom Benjamin's, I got so excited when I saw people unboxing this deck to see all of the curvy bodies in this deck. And there have been, and I won't name them all, I mean, there have been a number of decks released in the past kind of year or so that the total kind of homogeneity of very, very thin body shapes therein actually kept me from getting them. And so this deck kind of, I comment, this, I feel really overjoyed to see the humans in this deck. And I started working with this deck, and every reading with it has been so clear. Every time I would pull one tarot and one oracle card in the morning, the two would be really, really in sync. And and it's funny, and I posted this to Instagram. There's a card in here that is the Six of Swords, and I'm not going to find it now because the deck is all shuffled. But it looks like there's a canoe in the deck, and we just bought a canoe. It's like, this has to be related, right? This deck knows. So working with this deck has just been amazing. And I really like, now a lot of people know about the weird packaging that this deck came in, where the book comes glued to this box, right? I have liberated it. And I'm going to do a full review of this deck. Not a first impressions, but like a review of my workings with this deck and how I separated these, as well as my thoughts on the book, which has a lot of focus on things like self-care and empowerment, as the deck, the box describes. So I want to do a full review of this deck, so I won't say much more about it here, but I feel like something a lot of people are maybe curious about with this deck is how easy it might be to separate the book from the box, because like, to me, it's not functional the way that it is. I'm not going to tote this cumbersome box around to try to read the book, right? And it's totally doable. And I did it in very little time with very little supplies, and I could have made it look nicer if I spent more time really kind of finishing it beautifully. But what I will say is that it is really like the back cover of the book is pasted to the box. So when you separate them, you will still have the thick back cover on the book and the thick, sturdy box, right? You won't end up with kind of flimsy on either side. So I'll do a more thorough conversation about that. But suffice to say that this month, the Neo Tarot has totally stolen my heart. I'm not without my criticisms of the book in particular, but overall, working with this deck has just been so great. To the point that, I don't know what decks I'm going to work with in July, because I'm still working with this deck, even though I started working with it now a month ago. So it may just be a July of the Neo Tarot too, though I suspect when it arrives, it'll be the Numinous Tarot. The other deck that has completely taken a big space in my practice, I guess we'll say, in June, is a deck that I've been waiting for a long time. The Saltwater Reading Cards by Laura Bowen, published by Rockpool Publishing. This is a deck that I saw first shared by Katie Flowers, and it is by a Indigenous artist, Aboriginal artist from Australia, Laura Bowen. And Katie Flowers has shared this deck as well as her other deck, the Dreamtime Reading Cards, which I don't have. And this deck really spoke to me as a water-loving Pisces. I knew that I would like to work with this deck, and it comes with a really beautiful full color guidebook. The deck is smaller than I would prefer. I think it's 36 cards, but the cards are large, and each one just has a small keyword at the bottom: shark, action, as well as the title. And so in terms of decks kind of being compatible, yesterday I had the Shark, Action, and Eight of Wands from the Neo Tarot, right? These two seem to have really gotten along with each other. And the artwork in this deck is just beautiful. And this deck, for daily single card draw in the morning and then reading the book, has been a really great experience. And I had tried to get this deck once I had seen it, and I kind of decided, okay, this will be the next Oracle deck. And I don't have a lot of Oracle decks. I don't buy a lot of Oracle decks. But once I had decided to acquire it, I went on Canadian Amazon, which has lots of other rock pool decks as well. And it was only listed by third-party sellers, and it was listed like over well over $100, like out of print prices, right? And I couldn't find it anywhere. They didn't have it on Book Depository, nowhere. So I actually had to I emailed Rockpool Publishing and I asked them, you know, is the Saltwater reading cards out of print? Because then I would have just been very sad to have missed it, because it's not in my budget to be spending these massive out of print deck prices. And so someone emailed me back right away, and they said, we're just reprinting it now. So it'll be exactly the same as, you know, the edition you've seen from previous printings, but we just have to reprint it. Just wait kind of a month or so, and it will be back available in the US and Canada again very soon. And so I waited, and it was a little bit longer than they had suggested, but it came back, and I purchased it for kind of mass market price. And I was really, really happy to have it, and I would love to do a review of that deck as well later on. So books I've read, I have a huge stack of things here. I didn't really do much in the way of kind of shopping or anything like that in June, but I have a lot of stuff here to show. So the book I read for June, I read 2 books, and I think I talked about them both in my May recap, like this is what's coming up. The first book that I read is a short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month, which is by N.K. Jemisin. And N.K. Jemisin is one of my favorite speculative fiction and fantasy authors. It's her bio in the back of the book. Notes, N.K. Jemisin is the first author in the genre's history to win 3 consecutive Best Novel Hugo Awards, all for her Broken Earth trilogy. So like the Best Novel Hugo Award, if you write in kind of science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction, is a huge award, you know, and to win 3 consecutively for 3 books in a trilogy is like unheard of. N.K. Jemisin is fucking awesome. And I have read every novel that she's published so far. I was actually recommended her work by a student, and I am so glad that I was, and I'm very appreciative of that. I love her work so much. And these stories, you know, there's a really, really wide range in there. And inevitably I liked, you know, some a little bit better than others here and there, but overall the collection was really, really amazing. And, you know, we have had conversations, and I've had conversations around representation, right? Representation in tarot and diversity in tarot, and lack of representation and diversity in tarot, right? And these kind of conversations, I think, are important to have in the tarot community, but they go so far beyond that, right? And she speaks to that in her introduction here. And I just want to read a little passage or two from her introduction. So she writes, in 2002, I knew that as a Black woman drawn to science fiction and fantasy, I had almost no chance of getting my work published, noticed by reviewers, or accepted by a readership that seemed to want nothing more than endless variations on medieval Europe and American colonization, right? Lack of representation, lack of meaningful representation. I talked about it in the context of science fiction and fantasy writing, for sure. And I think that these conversations are really, really important, right? And so a lot of her stories deal with oppression and privilege and race and racism in different kinds of ways. And these kind of themes around exclusion and community run through her novels as well. And I really like the way that she talks about these things. So if you're interested in fantasy or speculative fiction, or you like reading short stories, so highly recommend How Long Till Black Future Month. And so wholly recommend N.K. Jemisin as a novelist as well. And she has a great website. She publishes essays there as well. Amazing. The other book I read, and I'm usually reading kind of a fiction book and a non-fiction book at any given time, one of each. So the other book I read in June was Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good by Adrienne Marie Brown, which I can't show the book because I have it on my Kindle, but I can read very quickly the description of the book from Amazon. So the description of Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown says, how do we make social justice the most pleasurable human experience? How can we awaken within ourselves desires that make it impossible to settle for anything less than a fulfilling life? Author and editor Adrienne Marie Brown finds the answer in something she calls pleasure activism, a politics of healing and happiness that explodes the dour myth that changing the world is just another form of work. So that's the first little bit of the description there. And it's kind of, there's a lot of pieces that are written by Brown, and then there are other essays by other authors that are also included, as well as assorted kind of interviews conducted by Brown with various folks engaged in various kinds of work. It was a really interesting collection. Inevitably, I think with a book like this, and I've read a few other reviews that felt very similarly, when it's a lot of kind of different voices, in any kind of anthology, inevitably some of the themes or some of the voices there are going to resonate with a reader a lot more than others. And I certainly found that with this one. There are portions of it that really, really worked for me, and there are portions of me that really, really, really did not. But I think that they're really interesting conversations that the book is working around. So if it sounds like a book that might interest you, totally worth looking at for sure. So those are my books. I don't really feel like I have anything interesting to talk about in terms of television or films that I've watched. I'm bouncing around Netflix as usual, but there's nothing particularly exciting. One exciting new, I guess purchase or something to come to me in June that I have wished for a very, very long time, and it's just never been, the right time or workable, is that I got a wearable wand from Kasia at Tarot Map and Wands of Transformation. I'll link Kasia's channel below. She has great tarot content, but she also makes these beautiful wearable wands. And I have looked at these on her Instagram and admired them for so long. But yeah, it's just never been either. There has, and they come in little batches that she, makes and releases a handful of them at a time into the world. In some batches there maybe is one that none of them quite seem to be the one for me. At other times maybe it's not the time to be spending money. But this one, it was the last one left in the bunch that she had released at the time. And it's a rutilated quartz on the bottom. And that one, it's quite small maybe compared to some of the other ones that she has made, or a bit plainer. That works really good for me, and I really, really love it. So thank you, Kasia, for this beautiful spirited wand, and it came so beautifully packaged with a dried flower and some little oracle cards and a message, and I very much love it, and it feels really good. It feels really, really good. So that is my one crystal for the month of June that I've been just taking around with me everywhere. I also, in June, for the first time, have jumped on the enthusiasm for Traveler's Notebooks. I've never had Traveler's Notebook before. Kelly from The Truth and Story published a video on her Traveler's Notebooks, and I'll link it below. And I will say, I am not a fancy stationery enthusiast or a elaborate planning system enthusiast or bullet journal enthusiast like I know a lot of folks in this community are. I'm not at all. For as long as I can remember, I have used the same very basic day planner every year from the local kind of office supply store, because I just needed to function. I really just needed to function. I'm not going to put in the work that something like there's like beautiful bullet journals involved. It's just not for me, if I'm honest. But what is for me is sustainability and not having to rebuy covers all the time, right? And every time I would get a day planner, I would have to rebuy a cover. So I finally, I decided, okay, this seems like it would be good too. So I bought this cover here, green, and it's Asian Vintage brand from Etsy. And it just has elastics on the inside. People have seen this. And the elastic closure on the back to hold it. And I'll link the Etsy shops below that I'm going to mention. So I got that cover, and it's great. I really like how it's kind of coming to feel and look aged over time already, even though I've barely had it. And then I also got a few inserts from Good Inkpressions on Etsy. So I got a few. One of them, I'm just going to find a kind of blank one. I got undated planner inserts. So I'm finding one that doesn't have my personal schedule written into it yet. August. So I got these undated inserts, and I just wrote in the month at the top, and I dated each of the days. And, you know, it's not fancy. It's not full of stickers. It's not, you know, but it works for me, and that's what I needed to do. And then I also got another from the Good Inkpressions, just a lined paper. And I think that this will be ultimately, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of kind of expense laid out to start off with the cover, but ultimately I think buying these kind of undated inserts will be more economically manageable year to year than buying a new planner with a new kind of leather look cover that's not really reusable. So I really like that. And I also often operate on kind of more of a school year calendar than a January to December. So the fact that I'm using the undated now is nice. I can't believe kind of how long it took me to get on this, but there it is. A new traveler's notebook just for me. So that was my June. In terms of upcoming in July, I have no idea in my July recap which decks I will be talking about, having spent the most time with. I did, for the June Pride special, order the Numinous Tarot. I'm so excited. I have no doubt that I will be spending some time with that deck. I also just received, and maybe I'll film an unboxing, I'm not sure. I'm kind of more interested at this point, to be honest, in filming deck reviews that speak to more kind of experience having worked with a deck, as opposed to just unboxing and first impressions. I did just get, and I'm very excited to have, the Spirit Keepers Tarot of Etruvian edition by Annabelle Wen, which maybe I'll do an unboxing, but I think that at this point I would rather do deck reviews than deck unboxings, because then you can give more of a well-rounded kind of, there's only so much you can say with first impressions, right? If you haven't read the guidebook yet and so on. So I'm not sure. We'll see. In terms of books that I'm reading for July, which I've already started both, but I'll be talking about in my July recap, I've started reading Philip K. Dick's last novel, Radio Free Albemuth. This is an old copy that a friend has loaned me. I really am only reading this book because I was lent this copy and I was suggested the book by a friend. I've read Philip K. Dick before, particularly Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and some other short story collections as well. So it's a very short novel. I'll probably maybe be sharing 2 novels in my July recap because this one is not going to take me long. So I'll talk a little bit about that novel later. I also have, and I feel really spoiled for amazing tarot books right now, because I got 2 new tarot books, and I already know that I'm going to like a lot about both of them, and I'm very, very excited, but I'm going to read them in the order in which I received them, which means the first one, which I'm reading this month, is Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow. And you'll know that this book would appeal to me immediately if you watched my ramble a couple of days ago on 2S LGBTQ plus representation in tarot, that this is something that is important to me for a whole host of reasons, just some of which I talked about in that video. I'm really excited to have I'm really excited to have a book that really gets into these kinds of questions, right, and really speaks to queer experiences in the context of thinking about tarot. And I'm sure I will have lots to say on that book, which will get its own review video from me. I also have a book on crystal grids that I plan to do a review video of, which I'm finished. And it's this book on crystal grids. So I will do a book review of that book as well in July sometime. I want to do a video reviewing the Neo Tarot in a thorough way, in which I will talk about altering the book and box as well. I would like to review the Saltwater reading cards, which I have just fallen in love with as well. I also want to do a review video, actually, and I can't believe I can't find one of these, and please link me if you know of one. This deck is called 100 Ink Animals, and it's a 100 card deck of all black and white. Oh, it focused. Amazing. Look at how beautiful this is. Snail. This is 100 Ink Animals. There's the back. This is actually the, I think, one and only deck in my collection that I did not purchase myself. This was a Christmas gift from my grandmother. I kind of nudged her in the right direction. She wouldn't have known what to pick if I didn't suggest it. But I haven't actually seen any reviews of the 100 Ink Animals. The only mention that I've seen of this deck is, I think it was Georgina Toland in her amazing YouTube channel mentioned it in a kind of top favorite Oracle decks of the year kind of context. So I really love the 100 Ink Animals deck, and I believe it's still in print and everything, so I would love to share a review of my thoughts, having worked with that deck quite a little bit. Finally, in terms of July, something I'm interested in doing for the channel, aside from I already mentioned taking it in more of a review direction and less in a first impressions unboxing direction, including some book reviews, I'm really interested in taking my channel outside, because I want to be outside for as much of July as is humanly possible. Right now, I film, if folks haven't seen, I film on a Logitech webcam that's I've got mounted on top of my laptop. I also have this snowball to pick up my voice. So I'm really interested in being able to film some content outside, show you some of my favorite outdoor places to do readings. I did post a video of a cottage that I love to go at a couple weeks ago, I think, or of a lakeside spot. I would like to make some more outdoor videos. I would love to know if you're a person who films outdoors regularly with anything other than your phone. What do you use? What kind of camera do you use? I'm thinking about having a camera. I haven't bought a camera in a very, very long time that I could use in this kind of way. But the phone that I use is a BlackBerry. It is really made for kind of workplace type applications and not so much for kind of multimedia type stuff. It has a camera, but it's not great. I also, when I'm outside, leave my phone at home as much as possible. And I don't want to risk breaking the phone, because breaking the BlackBerry would be, more costly to replace than I'm really able to risk at this point. But if you happen to be someone who films videos outside, if you have a kind of a more affordable, camcorder, or if you have like action cameras, things like this, if you would share that information with me in the comments, I would be tremendously grateful. I'm not the most tech savvy, but I'm doing some research, looking at the possibility of being able to film some video outdoors so that I can show you while the weather is briefly fantastic where I live, some of the places that I love to go. So that's kind of what's upcoming for July. I'll have a July recap at the end of the month as usual. I hope that this has been interesting if you stuck with me for this long. Thank you. And I will see you all in the next video and in the comments. Have a great day, and talk to y'all later. Bye.